Development Lab, specifically working on our relationship management, sort of helping support the agency in how it does and thinks about engaging the private sector. And this includes a range of work and advisory services that we actually provide internally within the agency as we try and think about how our missions and bureaus can work more closely with non-traditional actors, including the private sector, through trainings and through other support to help us better understand those relationships. So today I want to talk a little bit about our approach to relationship management with the private sector. And as you guys probably are all familiar with, but USAID, I mean, our mission is focused on how we partner, right? That's the way our mission statement begins. We partner to end extreme poverty, and really thinking about what does that mean for us, and how do we think about that going forward. As Todd said, we've been doing this for quite some time. Since 2001, USAID has built more than 1,600 partnerships with the private sector and leveraged billions of dollars. In 2015 alone, we had more than 365 active partnerships reported by our missions and bureaus around the world. And while that's a fantastic number and really exciting, we know that it's not just about the number of partnerships that we actually execute. It's not just about the number of dollars that we leverage, but as Todd said, and the thing we want to talk about today is really thinking through how do we focus a bit more on what does that mean for the relationships with those companies? What does that mean for relationship health? How do we build really strong relationships that help us get to a greater development impact? And we do that through a number of ways that I want to talk about today. So I think we've been doing this with a focus on a number of areas. One of those is through our research. And I'll talk about a few of the different ways we're doing that, but we really have been trying to be more methodical about thinking through how do we think about where we're getting the most bang for our buck, how do we build stronger relationships, and what's the impact on those relationships, on the impact of the programs. As Todd said, there's measuring the program success, but there's also measuring where those relationships are really worth building and taking the time. We've been doing that by thinking about how partnerships fuel sustainability. So how do those partnerships make our work more sustainable? We've been doing that through our Relationship Managers Network, which is an internal network within the agency where we've identified focal points for some of the larger companies that we work with, and really thinking through how do we build and have conversations, not just about what programs can we do together, but actually where do our work and your goals align? Where do we have alignment with your business interests that we can build a strong relationship and think about where we should be doing programs, or where we might be able to collaborate, support each other's work, not necessarily only in programs, but in dialogue and in other spaces. We've also been doing an internal stock-taking exercise where we're looking at how, as an agency, we do form these types of partnerships and manage those relationships. So what could we be doing differently in how our processes work, in how we educate and train internally our staff, to help everybody know where we can and where we can't have conversations, where we can form partnerships, where we can have dialogue, because obviously for those of you who work with government agencies, there's a lot of rules around how partnerships are formed, but there's also a lot of room for dialogue and discussion and creativity as long as people understand those rules and how to work with them. So how do we help empower our team and our staff within the agency to really do that creative relationship management in different ways and think through how partnerships could look, or what dialogue and collaborations could look like. And we do that through a range of methods, including more focus on the shared value partnerships, again, that business alignment, as well as thinking through options for co-creation, the formation of the Global Development Alliance, which we launched about 15 years ago, and also things like the broad agency announcement, which we've been using more, which is a way to really bring together people for dialogue, the private sector, as well as NGOs, potentially government, other groups, all of the stakeholders who are interested in an issue, to say, how do we look at this as a shared goal that we want to achieve together? Who has creative ideas, sort of acknowledging that we don't always have all the answers, but what we really want to do is get all the right people in the room, talk about how we can solve a problem, and figure out together who might be the right partners to do that. Let's not start from who can execute on this project, but let's start from what problem are we trying to solve, who's invested in this problem, and let's talk through what solutions might look like, including who might partner with whom to do that. But let's really just get everybody in the room to have that conversation. as a dialogue from the beginning. And I think, all of these are about us thinking through what we can learn about what's most effective in these. So for one example, we partnered with Dahlberg, Global, what's their full name? Global Development Advisors, sorry, thank you, the Dahlberg Group, to survey a bunch of the partnerships we had active, so 100 of our active partnerships, to really try and figure out where relationship management was making a difference in our work. And in that we found alignment, trust, and commitment were the three most important things in those relationships, coming from both the private sector perspective and from the agency perspective. And most of all, we found that trust and alignment were the two most critical, 30% higher than anything else as far as what made those relationships really, really stand out. And a few other elements that we found both through the research with them as well as other research we've conducted and our own experience actually building a lot of partnerships around what has really made those relationships be the most fruitful. And as I said, trust and strategic alignment is one of the most critical ones. But within that, there is some nuance. So in early stage partnerships at the setup phase, alignment and commitment were the most important things. So talking through where we actually have aligned interests, right? A Venn diagram of where the business interests align with our objectives, and really noticing where they don't, right? It's okay to say, your goals are not aligned with us here, go off and do that. But here's where we're seeing there is alignment, let's really dig in there. And finding that alignment and taking the time to do that, being committed to that, is something that made a huge difference to both sides. Whereas when we moved into implementation, really that's when trust became the most important. As Todd alluded to, really spending that time and building that relationship over time has helped make those more successful in the longer term. And that goes with in-depth understanding. That means taking the time to have those conversations, build those relationships. Again, it's not just the logistics of executing the partnership, right? Once it's formed, really making sure you're touching in with each other and having those dialogues and conversations to explore how are you feeling about it now, what's working, what's not working, where are we seeing pain points, where are there problems? Let's talk about those and proactively address them head on. And that's where we found that the relationship managers have been a really valuable aspect for this, of like having set up in advance a standing relationship where you're touching in, able to communicate, able to talk through, and really tackle those concerns and problems before they start to affect any of the activities you have going on, as well as making sure that you've got relationships that will sustain beyond a specific project, right? The projects that succeed and fail. We learn a lot from projects that fail, just like we learn a lot from measuring the successes of them, right? So you want to make sure you've got relationships that are strong, that will help build onto new partnerships, whether or not individual projects are, your shining successes. And I think that's where we've really seen establishing these norms and proactive communication that have ongoing ways to touch base with our partners can really make a huge difference. So what does that mean is next? The Relationship Managers Network has been up and running internally for some time, but we're still learning a bit about it. It's relatively new as far as an agency thing, as well as some of these other aspects of partnering, like co-creation and other ways we're looking to have more dialogue. And so I think that's part of why we're excited to be here today, to hear from all of you about how we might take this forward, how we might partner in the future, and continuously looking for ways to learn and improve how we partner with non-traditional actors, different groups, and really build those relationships to help us shape what partnerships can look like going forward.